Hello, I'm David Brabbins, founder of Studio Everywhere. Welcome to our latest edition of Insights Everywhere, our regular series of conversations with trailblazers from the brand, design, and wider creative industries. Today, we're really happy to be chatting to none other than Tom Middleton. He's a sonic renaissance man, pioneering electronic musician, synth wizard, sound architect, DJ, and more besides. Tom, please introduce yourself, and then we've got a few questions for you.
Thank you, David. Really great to be here. Tom Middleton, co-founder of White Mirror. We're a consultancy and production studio and neuroscience lab based in London, where we have our sensory innovation studio, and Lisbon, where we have our neuroscience research, testing, validation lab. My journey's been quite an interesting one to get to this point, in that I started as a DJ and a musician in the electronic sector. Toured the world, played to millions, experienced music in all its shapes and forms and genres and styles, and noticed that there were some quite useful therapeutic properties of music. So I was observing this benefit that people were deriving from music. Having made ambient music in the early 90s, a lot of people really enjoyed using it for things as diverse as, counseling and therapy sessions, giving birth to their children, using it to help, pain management. It occurred to me that beyond music as entertainment, there was this possibility that music could be leveraged for therapeutic, functional, or intentional purposes. So, born out of that, and after keeping people up all night raving, I got really burnt out midway through my career and reskilled, upskilled, if you want to call it that, as a sleep science coach and stress management coach, understanding what was happening to me with the burnout and the circadian disruption, jet lag. Why was that affecting my mood and my productivity? What could I do to biohack myself to be, better? And looking at all of the quite extraordinary things that one does with music and sound, beyond this, lovely thing that happens when a bunch of people go to a festival or a club and dance, the tribal ritual of that. People use music in other ways. So I started to unpack how we could best utilize music and sound as a therapeutic modality. And so White Mirror was born out of this need for me to fix my own sleep, help my friends, and reframe ambient electronica as functional music for well-being. And it's expanded beyond that. So White Mirror is now multisensory as opposed to unisensory. And when we say multisensory, we mean using visuals. We use Vibroacoustics, which is felt sound, haptics. We work with olfactory sense, so that's scent. Even gustatory, how we taste things. So how we perceive the world through our senses, we can utilize neuroscience and behavioral psychology to create effective experiences and content to help solve human problems.
Wow. I'd love to start at the beginning and sort of hear the story of your musical journey from the very start and almost how you proceeded towards the present day. Obviously, I know you from 20 years ago, the days of global communication, Jedi Nights, and some very memorable DJ sets at places like the Bomb. But there's clearly more to it than that. Yeah. Obviously, breathwork, psychoacoustics. You work for the likes of Calm and Breathonics. What's your North Star? What guides you?
Well, I think it's this desire to want to help. My dad was a teacher, professor, and was always looking after the local community, giving his time to help people. And it's built into my DNA. Be useful, help, and noticing that humans are suffering for the most part. We're all underslept, we're tired, we're anxious, we're burnt out to varying degrees, and mental health been decimated over a few years, and people are suffering. So what can we do with art? And there's this lovely term, neuroaesthetics or neuroarts, which is utilizing or leveraging the Trojan horse of art, which could be any kind of form of artistic expression, as a way to improve your overall health and well-being. So I was a designer, and then got into music, toured. I discovered the Aphex Twin back in the the late 90s, and that was, I suppose, my inroads to pivoting from graphic design into music. He invited me to his place and showed me how he was making music. This is the sort of the seminal selected ambient works and polygon window era Aphex Twin that a lot of people would say is the moment where the world was fully introduced to the mastermind and genius that is Richard D. James. But yeah, he taught me everything, showed me how to sample, to synthesize using analog kit, how to hack synthesizers. He had this Roland SH-101. Geeks out there will know that it's one of the best sort of classic monophonic synths. He'd taken the lid off it and had gone in with the screwdriver to change the potentiometer for the frequency. And what we're talking about is human perception of hearing is about 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, from low bass to up to high pitch sort of frequencies. What he had done is basically change the factory setting of this keyboard so that we could go below human perception of hearing, infrasonics, and ultrasonics above human perception. And we obviously joke about him playing around with this, and bats are bumping into the windows. We're echolocating with dolphins, and dogs are screaming, and we could count the pulses from the speakers that he had suspended from his ceiling doing this. We were the first, I think, to probably mess around with binaural beats. We didn't even know what we were doing, pulsing 2 or 3 hertz. Just we couldn't hear it. We could just see the speaker cones doing this. So we were experimenting and playing around, learning the art and science of sound production. Anything that you could hear had the potential to be music. Biggest take home. He'd go into his garage and start, making beats using whatever he could find to create rhythms with. Creatively sampling that, turning it into instruments. So throughout my career, I've always thought creative sampling was one of the greatest tools of the trade, being able to turn what you can hear to sound and music. And so my path went from learning in the studio as a protege, if you like, apprentice of Richard, to starting to work on my own, meeting Mark Pritchard, and we set up a record label. We've recorded as Jedi Knights, Global Communication, a whole plethora of other styles, chameleon, drum and bass, reload, techno, and accidentally fell into the world of DJing because people really liked the music and said, "Would you come and play this?" And we DJ'd for fun. We didn't really DJ professionally at that point. We just put on raves in Cornwall, and to then go from amateur, just lovers of music, to being hired to go and play music was quite an interesting shift. And then, can we do remixes? Yeah, great. And I sort of fell into this random kind of world of playing at festivals and clubs, remixing, and can't grumble. Got to see the world and meet some cool people, hang out with some A-listers, and see some things that that level you can't imagine what's going on. But all behind all of that was this sort of curiosity. I've always had a scientific kind of curiosity to understand more about sound and music and frequencies and vibration, and what can we do with it more than just listening to it, but what happens when you do listen to it. So the perception, the cognitive neuroscience of music, and how it goes in through here or through our body as we feel it, vibroacoustics and psychoacoustics. And can we do anything useful with it? Can we do anything socially responsible, ethically, in the sense that sound can be used as a weapon? We know that it can be so powerful and potent. It is deployed as a pulse weapon. What can we do that's does no harm but does good? And that's really the trajectory we're on at White Mirror, is unpacking the science around sensory perception and how can we leverage that to deliver social impact at scale.
Great. We've sort of worked together a couple of times to sort of apply your skills to building sonic identities for brands. What role does sound have to play in delivering great brand experiences, do you think?
It's been very interesting to observe the ascendance of sound branding and the fact that there are some huge companies now that have been bought by even bigger companies. The power of sound to help tell stories, to deliver emotional connection, finally seems to be valued when it was once not valued at all. It was an afterthought, a bolt-on. Oh, we need some music for a transitory campaign. But if you think about the most timeless examples of sound and how it's been utilized, jing, ding, 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 Intel Inside. I mean, everyone knows that, whether it's the sound of a particular notifications or alarms on your phone, whether it's certain brands that, I'm not even going to say it, you know what it is. Audi, the sound branding that really works stands the test of time. I think THX cinema sound was a classic. Some of the kind of intros and stuff we hear at cinemas have really kind of landed and stood the test of time. That's sound branding. If you can create a timeless, evocative, communicative identity, a mnemonic, something like an earworm, just a short few notes that can tell you something and remind you of that brand, you're winning, because you back up what's visually effective with something that's sonically effective. So working with you is really fun. We scored some golds and some silvers with Cinity, which was a real pleasure. Yeah. So I think what we've noticed in terms of the sound branding toolkit is, one, you unpack the values and what the brand is trying to deliver in terms of meaning. Is there a palette, a sound font that you could create that will help tell that story? Visually, we use fonts, we use color, we use space, we use images. But if you then add sounds to that, and I think George Lucas famously said 70% of a film experience is the soundtrack. I mean, he's right. If you take away the soundtrack from a film, it has a totally different effect. If you listen to Hans Zimmer's soundtrack to Dune 2, I mean, it would be a different movie if it had arbitrary kind of like music underneath it. The fact that it has this sort of nuanced storytelling ability amplifies exponentially the meaning and the communication power. So with a lot of the kind of sound branding work we do, the first stage is this unpacking. What does your brand sound like? Can we help you find your brand voice? Is there a human sound? Is there a voice of a person that you identify with a brand, and over time it sticks? Are there particular tones, frequencies? Is there a rhythm? Is there a beat? What is it about the brand? Who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? Can you leverage the power of sound in a more sophisticated way? And I think when we talk about sound branding, that to me is level 1. That's 1.0. What we do at White Mirror is sound branding 2.0. So it's functional sound branding. Can you not only tell a story, help people to remember who the brand is, but what if with that sound branding you deliver meaningful longitudinal health benefit? That's super interesting. So the brand theme tune in your assets for what you deliver in sound branding expands to just beyond the sound logo. You have a sonic toolkit, interface sounds, navigation sounds, website sounds, social media sounds, a brand theme, global variations of that theme. Once you start telling that story and get it amplifying it across the planet on various different touch points, you've got a very sophisticated way of compounding the message of what the brand is trying to deliver. And we get really excited about that because we see the opportunity to not only make a brand theme, but what if that brand theme tune could reduce your stress, could help you breathe better? In the case of one project for Otrivin, which is a nasal spray, we found the frequency that bees make. It's the same frequency that yogis use in a particular pranayama breathing exercise. We did some studies in the lab to basically show that if you exhale at the same time as making your nose vibrate, it helps you breathe better. So imagine sound branding for a nasal spray that also helps you to breathe better. tick, tick, tick. So this is the kind of thinking at White Mirror. We go beyond just arbitrary, what they call bing bongs, ding dong dong dong, into a useful tool. So an identity that actually delivers a health or well-being or productivity boost or benefit.
Great. Clearly, enabling technologies have always been a core part of your toolkit. Which sonic technologies are you currently most excited about?
Oh, don't get me started on generative and AI. I mean, this year, wow. Last year and the year before, we had, text to image. We're starting to really make headway in text to video, and it's mind blowing what's possible. Text to audio has kind of come through in the last year as well, and beyond text to audio, machine learning and being able to separate existing content into what we call stems, so individual layers. So imagine you've got a track, it's got bass, drums, vocal, keyboards, and other sounds. There is an app called Aphex Pro at the moment, which is literally blowing my mind. It takes a track that you put in there and it separates it into these individual layers of instruments. So a stereo file is unpacked to its component instrumental parts. Mind blown. You can change the pitch. Let's say there's a vocal in there. One, you could just get rid of the vocal. You could separate it, say goodbye, I just want an instrumental. You could change drums to other sounds. You could change bass to a different sound. You can change the key and the rhythm of the entire track. It looks like you're in a sort of Photoshop sort of realm here. So imagine Photoshop being able to manipulate sound and frequency, but beyond being able to turn a track into its component parts with Aphex Pro and basically not only remix it, but entirely reimagine tracks at a almost like sonic atomic level. And this is, AI at play here. You can literally text to audio a new section. You could find inspiration from the built-in sort of tools that are out there at the moment, and then take them, separate them, and use them again, and then replace things. So it's almost unlimited potential in terms of what you can do with sound right now. The other technology that we're really excited about, and we work a lot with Platoon and the Apple Music platform, which is spatial audio. Creating immersive audio environments has been really, really fun. For the new project, we're looking at spatial focus music. So we went into the lab and looked at what happens when you focus. So using a Muse headset, we were tuning into what is the feeling like when you hyperfocus. It's me in the lab, basically, with a headset on, basically looking like I'm a Jedi, making sound from my brainwaves in focus state. So it's a really,
or something more modern.
So a Muse headset, and what I do is I train using this sort of biofeedback process. I train myself to hyperfocus, and when I'm in a focus state, you hear melodies happening. When I'm not focusing, you don't hear any music at all. It's sort of like chaos. And then, so the music and the melody comes when you are focusing. So we've created an album of content for focusing based on my brainwaves when I'm in a focused state, which is kind of fun. And we've looked at the right sort of tempo to help you to concentrate. So wherever there's an opportunity for me to get into the lab in Lisbon and work with our neuroscientist on kind of mad, wacky ideas like this, I'm in. We unpacked the power of presence, working with the Spatial Sound Institute, looking at what is it about spatial audio. So for those of you that have experienced it, particularly with Apple's EarPods, you know the difference between stereo and spatial and this sort of head tracking technology. Let's imagine I've got headphones on now. Without head tracking, let's say in front of me and you're listening to it, here is a vocal. When I move my head, the vocal moves with you. So it's not really authentic. If I was in a room and I did that, the vocal shouldn't move. With the head tracking technology, this is what happens. The vocal stays here. So you move your head and what you're listening to stays still. That makes it more believable. So the power of presence can be leveraged to create more effective musical kind of content. We're using it in an intentional way, as in we want to make things that help people, so help you focus. Last time it was spatial sleep music, so I created music to help you deeply relax before you go to sleep using this spatial audio environment. And then a lot of artists are taking the spatial music technology into physical real world experiences. Polygon guys do phenomenal stuff with that, and I think we're just at the beginning of immersive audio and audiovisual experiences that really take you beyond the current kind of standards that we've got. We don't need to be limited anymore to stereo. That's the point.
On that note, in terms of the content, who's been inspiring you most musically, inside and outside the world of commerce?
I'm a big fan of another Nottingham lad, Lone Matt. He creates some really beautiful music. To me, it sort of ticks a lot of the boxes because it's not only future facing, but it's also reverential and respectful of the early 90s sound. So imagine somewhere between future sound of London and the Orb meets kind of early 90s sort of proto jungle rave. For me, it's fantastic. It's very melodic. It's the sound design is extraordinary. So between him and I really like Max Cooper. I think what he's doing is pretty stunning. And then other composers for me, the moment are, because of the work that I'm doing, I'm really interested in the sort of the film and soundtrack space. There's one composer called August Wilhelmsson. I think it creates just really, really beautiful music. And then we're working at White Mirror with a bunch of very, very talented female composers. Ellen Peel from Sweden, she makes beautiful ambient music. Francesca Pavese, aka Idra Sound, based in Milan. She has a modular setup and makes incredible sort of ambient drone, beautiful ambient music. Michelle Cade, based in the UK. Her normal work is the world of sort of sound therapy and healing using traditional kind of instruments, but the music she makes is incredible. Telling stories with sound using ancient instruments like native American Indian flutes to Nepalese bowls to gongs to ocean drums. It's amazing. You're starting to kind of connect back to your original sonic DNA, the tribes of 10,000 years before. Who else is to think? A lot of the sort of stuff that I hear in clubs perhaps doesn't impact me as much as it used to, because I'm seeking perhaps more than I used to. There's a good groove, but there's also a beautiful piece of music, and I think we know the difference. We feel it, and it's something we keep going back to. So I want anthems. I'm looking for anthems, and that's why I think musicality, John Hopkins, for example, pieces of music that have that layer of not only sound design but storytelling and emotionality, for me, is what I see.
Thanks. Good stuff. With the launch of Dune 2 recently, I mean, everyone's talking about it. I watched it last week. It's fantastic. I've been reading about how Hans Zimmer came up with the sonic universe the film inhabits. There's very much which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Apparently, during the filming of Dune 2, Villeneuve drops the script for Dune Messiah on his desk on day 2 of shooting and said, think about the sound for this. So tell us a bit more about your working process. Like, how would you bring a brief or a visual world to life sonically?
It's really interesting because I think the two things work really well together. And that's why there needs to be more round tables with different disciplines, the interdisciplinarity of someone that works in visuals, motion graphics, and then sound. I often storyboard when I'm creating a piece of music. So for my album Ep.002 as GCOM, I'd already imagined this story of traveling to exoplanets they sound like, and created visuals that helped me to then imagine them in the sound realm. So typically if it's like a commercial brief, there may well be some clues already. So, for example, with a recent hospitality brand launching in London in Mayfair in April, we were working with the agency. We knew what their visual direction was and what they were aiming for, this sort of otherworldly, deep relaxation environment. How do we then soundscape that? Or we have to take the visual cues that we've been given from the branding pack and then work with them and the client to unpack. How can we amplify the feeling? You've defined it with visuals, you've defined it with even a scent, branded scents and colors and the look and feel of the space. But how do we then tell that story using sound? And building this sound font, the palette of colors, is a really fun process because you can kind of just create endless Spotify playlists with the client and whittle it down to, here is a mood board. In the same way that you have a visual mood board, you have a sonic mood board. And with that, you can really kind of lock in the nuance of what is it that this brand sounds like. So typically that's the first step. It's the sound branding, unpacking of creating your palette of sonic colors to play with. And then what is the purpose of using that? Is it an identity? Is it a signal? Is it wayfinding? Is it informative? Or is it to soundtrack a piece of content? Is it a 90-second or 1 minute bit of social media marketing that you need to augment? And because you've already defined, if you like, the tone and the palette, it's much easier to then iterate different versions of this. So remixing and reiterating out of the sonic sound pack.
Who's your dream client?
Well, we're really lucky. I mean, we work with some of the biggest brands on earth at the moment. I think it would be nice to work with more healthcare and education. I wouldn't call them brands. I'd just say institutions. At that level, to me, is where the real impact can come in. It'd be good to work with governments. Can we help at just a regulatory level to improve the quality of life for people? So yes, you could have targets of, I want to work with the biggest brands on earth. I mean, there are definitely others where I think there's opportunities to scale impact and to deliver more value than just arbitrary, here's some sound and some visuals. Can we work with an agency like yours and the people that you work with to build better kind of value propositions where a brand can actually enhance prescriptively someone's health and well-being? I mean, that's a big strong look there for CSR? If you think about it, you're not only delivering a look and a feel, but wellness. So our biggest sector is the wellness sector, and all the touch points within that. Yeah, maybe working with some of the biggest health insurance brands would be interesting. How could they deliver more value to their customers? That could be a conversation. Quite keen on areas that I'm passionate about and interested in based on my experience. So more airlines, we've got some things lined up at the moment that could be really interesting, but would be good to work with some of the big airlines, the innovative ones, the ones that really want to take customer well-being to the next level using visuals and sound and light in their experiences. So there's a lot of work to be done, David. There's plenty of sectors. It's never ending.
It is. There's always lots to do. Final question, non-work related, unless you're working for the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Tell me more about that experience.
Oh my goodness. So my other hat is as an Archaeo-acoustics archivist. What the hell does that mean? I'm fascinated by the acoustic resonant properties of ancient megalithic sites. Fortunate to get some personal time with a small cohort inside the King's Chamber at the Great Pyramid in Giza. And that is a very interesting space, and started a whole rabbit hole of research. We discovered through me lying down inside this, you could call it a sarcophagus, but my theory is, or my hypothesis is, it was never a sarcophagus. It was a resonant tool for either transmutation, religious or spiritual ascension. It was a device for transcending, for coming out of your body. I lay down in the sarcophagus. The room, by the way, is quartz, so it's already a resonant material. And I was just toning to find the resonant frequency. You may have done it. The best way of doing this is if you're in the bathroom and you kind of tune up and down. Bathrooms are great for finding resonant frequency, and you find a note. I found this particular frequency just through toning. We captured it, recorded it. When I came back from the first expedition, if you want to call it that, I found that this particular resonant frequency seems to exist in other megalithic sites. So Chichen Itza, also, and these are kind of, Mayan pyramid structures. The space between these sites and the years between them makes you think, what technology or what guiding principles are being used to build these spaces? If they have the same resonant frequencies, that means that there are some, there's some sacred geometrical pre-Pythagorean arithmetic being used to intentionally create spaces that resonate at a specific frequency in order to deliver this effect. So I've gone off on a mad kind of hunt for magic mystical frequencies. Hypogeum in Malta. There's a place in the Shetland Islands. There's lots of sites. India has one where these spaces have been intentionally built to vibrate and resonate at very, very specific frequencies. And the question is, why? And the guess is that they were using frequency and vibration as a healing modality, or maybe a psychedelic assistance. I mean, you think about Blue Lotus and its use in Egyptian sort of history. There's no reason to think that perhaps this was a ceremony to have a psychedelic experience. So lots more to unpack on that one.
Wow. Quite a wormhole at the end. You can see how it all links to your good work. Tom Middleton, thanks for your time, and speak soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.